of today's session. So welcome and thank you all for joining us in the Open Science South Asia Network Conference. OSSAN is an international conference organized by the DST-CPR IISc Bangalore. It aims to inculcate the concept of open science among the region's researchers. It is also a step towards forming a network for translating knowledge into actions in open science domain. This entire project is funded by Code for Science and Society. The main organizers are myself, Dr. Moumita Kole. I'm an STA policy researcher at DST-CPR IISc, and the focus of my research is open science. Along with me, I have Dr. Pragya Chaube, project scientist at DST-CPR, and Dr. Gautam Sharma, postdoctoral research fellow at DST-CPR. Professor T.A. Abhinandanan is the coordinator of DST-CPR IISc and one of the PI of the OSSAN project. Mr. Janav Bharadaj is working with us as background support for the conference. As we know, open science is an emerging concept that aims to democratize science and has been extensively promoted by the researchers, policymakers, librarians, and international organizations like UNESCO, OECD, and international science councils, to name a few. Open science advocates for a research ecosystem to be more inclusive, transparent, and efficient. At present, open science conversations are dominated by discussion on scientific research outputs such as articles and data. Globally, more attention so far has been focused on the knowledge dissemination side with little contemplation of the knowledge creation process itself. The cultural diversity in knowledge production is less examined so far as well. We have tried to maintain the conference themes and discussion aligned not only onto the knowledge dissemination, but also the creation side with a specific focus on the South Asian context. Additionally, we have tried to bring diverse viewpoint into the discussions or activities. Funding agencies, institutions, researchers, publishers, all are the main stakeholders of the ecosystem. And we have tried to be inclusive in creating the conference program to make the discussion more democratic without leaning towards any sides. Before we dive into the scholarly content of this conference, I would like to invite Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Senior Advisor at the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, to deliver his opening remarks. Dr. Gupta is the main architect of India's upcoming 5th STI policy, where open science is being promoted for the first time. Over to you, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, Dr. Moumita. Professor Liaquat, Fellow of Bangladesh Academy of Science, Bangladesh. Professor Priyan Diaz, President of National Academy of Sciences of Sri Lanka. Dr. Sunil Babu Shreshtha, the Vice-Chancellor of the Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, Nepal. Professor Bellare, the Honorary General Secretary, National Academy of Science, India. Professor Umesh Wagmare, President of Indian Academy of Science, India. Professor Hony, Professor, Indian Institute of Science. Distinguished participants to this very important conference, ladies and gentlemen. I think Dr. Moumita has already given a very crisp and a very detailed outline of why this event is being organized and what is the importance. So let me say a few words about why open science is so relevant for today. The science is a global pursuit, and the kind of overarching challenges that we have today, such as climate change, energy, food security, healthcare, and so on, and especially during this pandemic, the healthcare became the very important area of concern. Now, globally, there have been collaborations in science and very successfully being pursued by different countries. But in today's context, in fact, with the kind of experience that we have in the pandemic, the collaboration at the global level, at the regional level, at the national level become very, very relevant and important. And so this is the age of collaboration. Nobody, however mighty, can be in terms of country or individual cannot work in isolation. So there is a need for global and regional collaboration, especially in the area of science. And in fact, this has been well recognized by UNESCO and in the last few years. UNESCO has been trying to bring countries together and work on open science. So the open science is nothing but how science can be shared in terms of both, the primary and the secondary data, especially the knowledge sharing is the key to open science. As a part of, in fact, India's initiative in open science, when we started formulating the National Science and Technology Innovation Policy 2 years back, the open science was one of the areas that we brought prominently in that draft STI policy, and this is under consideration of Government of India for finalization. This particular event that we are having today is actually, work on the, when we propose to have an open science framework that, work at the regional level and which facilitate seamless access to articles and data generated through various sources. And also we need to have the different scientific resources to be put in that context. Now, in fact, at the regional level, we, in fact, the countries have very similar kind of, geopolitical and the scientific level position. So this is an opportunity that all of us can join hand, create a network or a consortium and work together for promoting the open science. Let me mention that in India, we have already taken an initiative recently, and we are working on one nation, one subscription model for journals. Now, these scientific journals are being subscribed, even I'm sure in all the countries where the general trend system is that being subscribed at the individual level or at the institution level. But the kind of cost that is incurred through this subscription is huge. And just give you a number in India, it actually costs rupees 1,500 crore in Indian rupees to, if you put together all the cost of the institution subscribing this, and the entire benefit is to the agencies, the general agency that publication, they get the benefit of all that. What we are in fact proposing now as a part of one nation, one subscription model, where the entire subscription become central. So there will be a centrally negotiation agency that negotiate with the journals and all those top journals that all of us know. And then we get a price that how much is the cost that we get centrally. The advantage will be that with this centrally negotiated cost will be paid by Government of India, we make the subscription or general, almost everything is free to everybody, individual as well as institution. So there are two benefits. One is that individual and institution need not have to spend money. And second benefit is that it will become more democratic and it goes across. And anybody who wants a journal can just register with that agency and interagency and then. Now this connection, government has already set up the cost negotiation committee for this One Nation, One Subscription journal. We also already started working on this. The committee has been notified. And so the general guiding principle that will follow is that the government of India will obtain a single national license for subscription to journal to a national central consortium. So this is a model which may be replicated or thought of by other countries also. This will break the supremacy. Also, it will help creating a more democratic sharing of knowledge in terms of journalism. In the same way, we are in fact proposing all our, the libraries to become more digitized and shareable. Also, we are going to set up a national portal where all the publicly funded, all the projects that are publicly funded, the output of that project will be put on this national portal, which will where everything becomes shareable, not just with India. Anybody in the world can access that. So this is another thing that we are already is in the agenda. We are already started working on the national portal. So we are in fact moving forward with several such initiatives, and so that it become very so far as India is concerned, we should be able to have all the resources shareable and bring transparency and total openness in terms of this thing. This will also help in creating a better quality of research in the country, because many of the journals which are not available to universities, especially the university and colleges, they can't afford that the kind of money that is required to be put as further subscriptions. Also, along with this, we are also working on the APC. You know that the article processing charges are quite high, and they are many times become unaffordable. So we are also working on APC, and some kind of model is being evolved for that purpose. Unlike the subscription journal, the APC requires is much trickier because it cannot be centrally negotiated easily. So we are working on a new kind of mechanism where APC can also be, facilitated for all these. So also there are many other things that India is in fact trying to put in position, and for example, the classroom lectures and other things that so more use of ICT to facilitate those kind of open science material, create those materials and make it available at a central location so that gets the researcher, especially the young researcher, get the benefit of it. So I will stop here. I will just only say at the end that there is urgent need for all of us to come together. Region is we are very homogeneously placed, and we all can work together And this is a good initiative that we are, in fact, today we are meeting this way. And I'm sure that this will take the OSAN initiative forward. And I wish this conference all the best. And I would request the organizer to make extra effort to create this network or consortium. The Department of Science and Technology, Government of India will give its full support for this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. This was wonderful, and your encouragement means a lot to us because we need to come together, as you said. So this is one step towards that. So I won't take much time, and I would invite our dignitaries from our neighboring countries representing their country, and I will go by the alphabetic order of the country. So at the beginning, I would like to invite Professor Liaquat Ali, Fellow, Bangladesh Academy of Science. Professor Ali is the Vice-Chancellor of Bangladesh University of Health Sciences and an honorary professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Cell Biology in the same university. Professor Ali, over to you.
Thank you very much, Momita. Good morning, all the dignitaries from India and all other neighboring countries, Bangladesh. First of all, please accept my warm greetings from Bangladesh. And I'm very grateful to the organizers of this conference, OSSAN conference, for inviting us, the Bangladesh Academy of Sciences, to say something in this very auspicious occasion. Actually, we have learned, particularly during the COVID-19, that no country can develop in isolation. All of us in the globe is interdependent. And particularly, when we were tackling the border problem during the COVID-19 transmission, we realized with great elation that how important it is to work closely. So it is from health side, I'm basically a person from health side, but it is for everything. It is for climate, it is for agriculture, it is for all development. And that's why I think regional collaboration is the starting point for a global. And if we cannot collaborate in the region, there is no question of global collaboration. So I am very grateful that you have taken this initiative. And we have heard from Dr. Gupta the excellent initiatives which they have initiated through the government of India. And I'm really very hopeful. And in fact, if we look forward for this initiative to be successful, and if you kindly connect with us, because obviously India should lead because of the mere expertise which they have in the very large country. So we would be very glad from the Bangladesh Academy of Sciences to be a part of this initiative, and whatever is in our capacity, we'll be glad to do it. In fact, we have very rightly, you have very rightly taken the point that this should not be only in the dissemination point aspect, it should be also in the generation aspect, because unless data and original evidence is generated and shared in common for common good, it is not only for dissemination. Dissemination can be just bubbles then. So let us start from this point, and we hope that this initiative of OSSAN will make concrete action plans for this, and within the action plan they should define what we should do as an organization, as a Bangladesh Academy of Sciences. And in Bangladesh Academy of Sciences, we have 52 fellows who are from diverse disciplines. So they are also part of their own institutes. I have retired from Bangladesh University of Health Sciences recently. This is I'm no longer Vice-Chancellor there, but I have my other institute where I work. We have other fellows who have their own institutes. So we can ventilate this message to everybody. And I think we will be very, very glad to work together. And that is starting from knowledge generation to knowledge dissemination. And this should first start with the just openness in the interaction and openness for traveling, because I'm giving my personal example just for very briefly that within from April, I had to go to India for different purpose. to Mysore for an anthropomorphology congress, and then in Delhi for another congress, and in IIT Guwahati only a few days back. And every time I had to go for visa. And the effort and time I had to spend on visa is enormous, I tell you. And this is a freedom of movement issue, very mundane issue, I think, but this signifies how difficult it is to collaborate among the scientists in this part of the world. So I think we should have something to start with. This is just an example. I hope that we can really work together, the regional countries, because we have many genetic, environmental, and cultural homogeneity, which can really translate into very combined, action. Recently in December in Delhi, we have in CRO, WHO, we have designed the primary healthcare strategy for the whole region. And it was so excellent that to share, to, economize the resources, to plan certain common activities. And it was very rewarding. So I think we can go for basic science, applied aspects, and innovations. So I think we have very short time, so I'll close here. And again, thank you very much for inviting. And we are with you from Bangladesh Academy of Sciences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ali. This was wonderful. And we all know that there is so much of hurdle while collaboration. And this is one of our major aim, that ways that we can come together and diminish all the hurdle that we have for the collaboration. Okay, so I will now move forward to Nepal. So we have Dr. Sunil Babu Shreshtha, who is Vice-Chancellor of the Nepal Academy of Sciences and Technology, Nepal. He is also the Editor-in-Chief of Nepal Journal of Science and Technology. Dr. Sunil Babu Shreshtha, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Momita. Distinguished dignitaries, speakers, participants, and ladies and gentlemen, I, on the behalf of Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, and on my own behalf, please accept warm greetings from Nepal. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Open Science South Asia Network, OSSAN, for the invitations to me to participate in this OSSAN 2022 conference, and also providing me this opportunity to say a few words. It is indeed a matter of immense pleasure for me to have a privilege of conveying my welcome and introductory remarks on this OSSAN 2022 conference. As a Vice-Chancellor of Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, NAST, I have a great pleasure to congratulate the OSSAN and its association for organizing such an international event. It came to my knowledge that this is the first OSSAN 2022 conference being held in the South Asia region, although it is online. Pioneering such an event of this magnitude is highly appreciable. I hope that the OSSAN will make its continuous effort for organizing such an event in the days to come, as well as for advocating and promoting the science practices, open science practices, for building better science, technology, and innovations ecosystem. Nepal's National Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy 2019 has also emphasized for the open science. I'm confident that these knowledge-sharing platforms, as a part of the science diplomacy, shall be a stepping stone towards the common understanding of open science and its associated benefits and challenges, as well as supporting to develop an enabling policy environment for open science in South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, NAST, which is an apex institution of the science, technology, and innovation in Nepal, mandate for our academy ranges from the science popularizations to the innovative research for the common cause of social transformations and the overall prosperity. In recent years, NAST has also been carrying out the different research, innovation, publications, and the promotion activities through the open platform, like the National Innovation Digital Network, National Science, the Climate Change Knowledge Management Portal, Online Access, Nepal Journal of Science and Technology, etc., to tackle the increasing trend of the urbanizations in Nepal. The NAST is initiating the Food Green City program, having the MOU with the municipalities of Nepal to integrate the urban agriculture with the land use planning for making our cities more greenery and easy access to the food locally. The application of the open source software for the modeling the potential of the vertical and the horizontal farming in the urban context can also be one of the particular interests for the NAST. With the support from the UNDP, we're also developing the Food Green City digital platform for sharing the knowledge and bringing together the stakeholders for promoting the science and the Food Green City activities with the solutions, making the positive impact in the society. The vision of the NAST is science for society, innovation for prosperity. Aligning with this vision, the science needs to be open to the societal benefits. The free open software in the geospatial technology can provide the geo data analysis for the very social issues, which then can be applied to tackle with the social problems. For this, it is required to develop the trained human resources, open science infrastructure and services for fostering the culture of science, open science, and which demands the large investment in the open science sector. By promoting the innovative and collaborative approaches among the national and international multi-stakeholders cooperations, it is easy to meet the investment required, reduce the knowledge gaps, share the benefits, and solve the problems of our society to lead towards the prosperity. I personally believe that in this digitally advancing world, promoting the open science has a great importance. Therefore, in this context, such conference is highly relevant for developing the human resources required for the 21st century of the digital world. I hope that the deliberations from the highly experienced speakers in this conference will provide an ample opportunity for the participant to acquire the knowledge and further motivate the collaborating each other to achieve the shared benefits in the South Asian region through network. Finally, I sincerely thank the organizing team for bringing this conference in this stage. NAST is glad to be a part of OSSAN to organize an important event like this and the other activities to promote the open science in the future. I am confident that this conference will be exploring how open science in the South Asia can work better for the benefits of the society. Ever since I have joined the NASA as its Vice-Chancellor, I have been emphasizing on the partnership with the national and international professional societies, research and academic institutions for any initiative that ensures the science for society and innovation for prosperity. NAST has always been supportive to the innovative ideas and the programs of individuals or the institutions. NAST will be happy to collaborate with the OSSAN if any potential areas of collaboration is identified in future. I, on the behalf of NAST, promise you to be together with you in your future endeavors. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for your participation in this event and listen to me. Once again, I wish the every success of this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shreshtha. It was wonderful, and we get a lot of encouragement from your speech that actually we can do a lot together for the region through the collaboration in science and technology. So now I will move to Sri Lanka. So we have Professor Priyan Dias, President, National Academy of Sciences of Sri Lanka, and Emeritus Professor in Civil Engineering, University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka. Over to you, Professor Dias.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak. I also want to thank you for this initiative, which is very important. So 2 other members of our academy are participating on the 8th as well in your deliberations. I would just like to speak on 4 aspects and also try to speak a little from personal perspective, because this open science is a very multifaceted thing. And of course, the first thing perhaps is on open access publishing. Everyone is encouraged to do open access publishing. If I look at my list of publications, I have very few, if any at all, open access publications, largely because I cannot afford the article processing charge. Now, sometimes you have institutional support for this. So when I was director of research at the University of Moratuwa, we had a small fund that academics could apply to. But of course, in countries like ours, the pot of money is not unlimited. The maximum we could afford was $1,000 US. Now, all of you know that with $1,000 US, you cannot publish in a Q1 good quality journal. So the moment you do that, although we are promoting open science in that way, you are also unfortunately indirectly promoting a system where you are encouraging people to publish in less recognized journals. So this is an issue. I'm sure you will deliberate this. But these are the kinds of problems that we need to find answers to. And then, of course, even where these reputed journals are concerned, starting from Nature and then even going on to journals like the Journal of Cleaner Production and things like that, they have started their own companion journals, as some of you may be aware. So that, rather than increasing the number of issues in these journals, very often they ask authors to publish in their companion journal, which is an open access journal, which once again requires an article publishing charge. So I was very encouraged by the comments that the first speaker mentioned. I have forgotten his name, I think from the Indian Department of Science and Technology, about, schemes whereby, these, both the article processing charge as well as the subscriptions can be made more accessible. Now, I think there are ways of doing that. I don't know. I can remember those days there used to be textbooks and even novels which said, for use only in the Indian subcontinent, so that kind of segmented marketing. I think we need to try and persuade people, the publishers, to take on this kind of approach so that it will be more accessible to us. The second thing is about open data. Recently, I contacted a professor in Australia about some data that was 20 years old, because there are new ways of looking at that data. He had been using that data in a Markov modeling scheme, but now some of my students are using things like machine learning techniques to analyze this data. Fortunately, he was able to find the data. But now, even all these journals are asking authors to share data sets. There are also journals that are dedicated to data, like Data in Brief, which are also open access and therefore accessible to all researchers in our region as well. So I think we need to, both promote open data and also make use of the data that is available from all over the world. And we need to encourage our scientists to look at this data and sort of, process things in different ways. So this is, I think, an age of data, and we need to make use of all the data that is available. The third thing that I want to say is about open collaboration, and I want to echo something that Professor Ali mentioned. Actually, as president of the National Academy of Sciences, every year we have to nominate 2 people as young physician leaders. Earlier in the year, they had to go to Italy, and they could not even get their applications into the Italian embassy. Now they have been invited to a meeting in Germany. I do not know whether they are able to go. So why is it that visas are only based on country or nationality? Why cannot visas be based on, say, memberships of certain associations, maybe even academies? And that might make it very narrow. There are only few scientists in academies. But even people in academies, like Professor Ali, for example, he has to spend so much time, and sometimes we may not even get these visas. I think we need to have a change of mind, and this will involve engaging with sort of, authorities, state authorities. But, if a group like OSSAN takes this on, maybe it is something that we can consider. Do not consider me as a Sri Lankan, consider me as a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences when you're thinking about giving me a visa or denying it. However, let me end on a positive note. I will talk about this whole idea of open connectivity, which is reflected in today's meeting as well. So in 2019, there is a group that I'm involved in relating philosophy and engineering. There was a major conference in Valparaiso in Chile. Now, even before thinking about a visa, I could not afford to travel to Chile, right? So because of that, it was not possible for me to participate in it. And there was a very eminent philosopher of engineering who encouraged me to go to that meeting because he reviewed a book of mine. But I knew I wouldn't be able to go. But then, of course, because of COVID, the entire meeting was online. I was able to present my paper. Now that is part of a book collection, a book chapter in a collection of books. And therefore, this open connectivity, in a way, makes things much more open, even though we have visa issues. So I'm sure all of these things are things you are aware of, but some of them we need to find answers or solutions to. And let me wish these deliberations well. But let me, in conclusion, say, we need to promote this kind of regional collaboration. Very good. But when we are promoting it, we must also make sure that we participate on the global stage, right? Because the whole world is a very small place. We cannot only stick to our region. Sometimes we can work as a region so that it gives us some kind of collective advantage, but we must participate, we must listen to, and we must be heard on the world stage. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dias, for giving us such an wonderful ideas, as well as you mentioned that definitely as a regional collaboration is important, but we have to place ourselves in the global scale as well. And I am also hoping that the initiatives that India is taking for open research articles and data, we hope that this should not be just within India. We would be able to make the South Asian countries also part of such initiatives so that we can have more knowledge exchange. Thank you, Professor Dias. Now I will move to our Indian Academy side. So it's my pleasure to invite Professor Jayes Bellare, the Honorary General Secretary, National Academy of Sciences, India. He's the Chair Professor of Chemical Engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Over to you, Professor Bellare.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, I thought I'll put some of our thoughts on a slide here. But before that, let me thank Dr. Kolin, Dr. Chaube, and of course, my fellow academic colleagues, Professor Godbole and Professor Wagmare on this. We are all in this together. And some of the views of the National Academy of Sciences is expressed in this slide. I won't go through all of it, but I'll just look at some of the things that the National Academy of Sciences India does, which is highlighted in this lavender color here. Which is largely through its science and society initiatives, right? I mean, ultimately, it has to reach society, and views of eminent scientists through the science and society initiatives do reach those. We attempt to do that. We have very special programs targeting the scheduled tribes, training of school kids, women's empowerment, sensitization of society to current issues. And something very unique is the development of the river galleries, which shows the science and ecological impacts of some of the great rivers of India, and of course, which exist in South Asia as well. So, with all of this, attempts to make science open, the issues that Dr. Akhilesh Gupta mentioned, which are which all our academies are gripped with, becomes important. So this concept of one nation, one subscription is key. I wish it every success in quick implementation. However, the problem of the APC still remains. So what NASI really wishes, point number 9 on this slide, is really to have open access without charges to either author or reader, which is something we all should strive for. And many of our own journals are being pressurized into a variety of arrangements through the so-called transformative process, which we have difficulty in addressing. These are things we are trying to address. And we find that this really becomes a disadvantage in terms of, for all of us, not only in India, all of Southeast Asia and many other countries of the world, the visibility of research, the ease of access to global research. These are things that affect us very severely. So who pays and how much really remains undecided. Even DST has not come to grips with how to handle the APC charges. Yeah. On top of this, there is the growing need at an individual, especially young scientist level, to publish. Yeah. And therefore, this rising menace of predatory journals is something that is really worrisome. And this concept, which I think will be deliberated more on this concept of open preprints and open review is really welcome. But at the same time, one really needs to think about whether we can break the traditional publishing house model to see whether there are any alternatives to make this problem really go away and democratize research. So with that, we, on behalf of NASI, wish this OSSAN conference every success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bellare, to highlight the problem that we are facing on the open science domain in India. And it's just not India, that's a kind of a global problem that this APC costs are so high. We don't have an alternate model, whereas we fall prey to the predatory publishing. So I think that the discussion that we are trying to bring forward through the conference and beyond is that we have more knowledge about the whole system, and so that we can take collectively decision what is good for us as a scientist and good for the society. So we hope that we will be able to deliberate important point during the conference. Thank you. So now I will move to Professor Umesh Vakmare, President, Indian Academy of Sciences, India. He's a professor in the Theoretical Sciences Unit at Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research. Over to you, Professor Vakmare.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kole and Dr. Chaube. It's my pleasure to be here representing the Indian Academy of Sciences at the OSSAN 2022 meeting. Today, the economy is global by construction, and sustainable progress of each country depends on others. There is increasing need to be open generally, to be inclusive and collaborative across geographical borders. Sustainable development needs interdisciplinary research in science and technology and can be achieved only through cooperation and openness between different groups and countries. Science is a shared knowledge based on a common understanding of some aspects of a physical and social world. Central to sharing such knowledge is the practice of education and publication of research. I'll quote E.H. Miller, who said this in 1993. If it was not published, it was not done. And I'll quote George Whiteside, said in 2004, a paper is an organized description of hypotheses, data, and conclusions intended to instruct the reader so that she or he can reproduce the work. If one's research does not generate papers, it might just as well not have been done. So this indeed emphasizes how important is the process of publication of research in our profession and development. So papers facilitate sharing of knowledge generated with peers and researchers. Equally important are the public interactions and outreach. Publicly funded academics must make effort to communicate effectively about their findings and implications to the society in accurate and accessible manner that will facilitate their participation in the process of evolution of scientific ideas. I'll quote here Scientific American, which relates to what happened in the recent years. If rapidly and openly sharing research data and papers is critical to understanding and combating coronavirus, doesn't the same hold true for other diseases like cancer or even climate change? Goes on to say, open science is the most efficient way to tackle issues that have significant and direct effects on the lives of general public. And the unambiguous conclusion of that article is that open is better for science. So for long-term and robust development, it's essential that science is free of bias and discrimination. Diversity is the key and rather important in this enterprise. It could be in terms of geographical background of a person, racial background, gender, sexual orientation, race. The diversity is crucial, and equality and fair access to all is rather important. And indeed, this is also naturally supported within the framework of open science if it is implemented in a sort of rather strategic way. Practically, open science to access publications leads to the use of open science techniques. So it relates to the earlier comments about sharing of data or sharing of research resources, equipment, or publications. And in this case, I must say the science publications take the lead. Author, journal, reviewer, and reader relationship is a collaboration which keeps the science up. And openness in this is rather important. And of course, how to implement it, it's a matter of detail, and I'm sure this meeting will have deliberations on that, but I'm sure there are different ways of handling it, and that depends on the economic background of each country and the group. But I think it needs to be formulated in a way where it is inclusive of all the people in the world. Open access to research data and publications enable 4 things. One is accelerated discovery of scientific nature. B, more readily making use of the results of earlier works. C, greater reproducibility and stronger ethics, which also is important, and better allocation of funds, possibly giving more fair and efficient research ecosystem. Some challenges are there, of course, and these include the concerns of research integrity due to growing pressure on researchers. Just like predatory journals are coming up, researchers are also on a little loose footing there in terms of research ethics and integrity, and of course, tightening of funding for research. And I believe that all of these challenges are easier to tackle if we switch to open science framework. Because transparency in sharing of data will solve many of the issues here. Finally, South Asia covers a large population, almost 1/4 of the world population, with a remarkable diversity in terms of religion, ethnic groups, languages, and socio-economic strata. So given the resources available are limited in these our countries, and the issues like climate and sustainability are tightly interdependent and shared, it is absolutely essential that there is collaboration between these countries through promotion of open science, and needless to say, it should percolate to the rest of the world. I should point out that the 10 journals which are published by the Indian Academy of Sciences, where a large number of submissions come from the South Asian countries, and the entire content of the publications is available for free online at the Academy's website. And I, in fact, encourage all the community here and outside the South Asia as well to submit their papers to our journals. Indeed, the Academy is committed to promoting open science and cooperation for the cause of society and with no bias and boundaries. And OSSAN is indeed a great initiative in this direction. And I wish you all a great meeting in the coming 4 days. Developing open science network. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wagmare. It was very eloquent, and you actually already told the participant what are the advantages of open science, and I hope that we will be able to take all this in real action, not just in the discussion. And obviously, we will deliberate in the coming days how we can take all this into really an actionable item. So finally, for this session, our final speaker is a prominent Indian scientist and also an avid supporter of women pursuing career in science and technology, Professor Hony. She is a professor at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Over to you, Professor Godbole. You are on mute.
Yes. So, good morning, everybody. So, Momita and Pragya, thank you very much for the meticulous organization. So, a lot of people like Professor Akhilesh Gupta, Professor Ali, Diaz, Professor Shreshtha, Wagmare, Bellare, all have said so many important things. So there is an advantage in speaking at the end, because you get time, many, many important things that you wanted to say have been already said very eloquently. So I can sort of be a little loose, as it were. So indeed, I think we have heard very important aspects of open science and why open science. There is one point that open science is good for science. I mean, that is actually one of the things that we have to also keep in mind. Or even the DEIA, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, it is something that is good for science because it leads to better science. And therefore, we really have to have this forum. And given the fact that there are geopolitical, cultural similarities among all the 3 countries that we are getting together here, in fact, it makes a lot of sense not to reinvent the wheel, but to discuss things together and develop frameworks where we all can work together. So indeed, the idea of having open science South Asian network is extremely important. I wanted to add actually to the statement about open access of Indian journals of the Indian Academy of Sciences that Professor Wagmare alluded to. So in fact, I had been the chief editor of one of the journals of Academy for quite a few years, and I had been associated with that journal, Pramana. And in fact, I remember that when we had the co-publication agreement with Springer, which is one of the things that was mentioned by Professor Bellare also about the co-publication agreements that other bigger publication houses are trying to kind of proposing. At that time, one of the things that we actually used as a criterion for choosing the collaboration was to say that Academy's publications are open access on Academy's webpage. So I think that's, so somewhere that thing had always been there at the Indian level. What I have been particularly been very pleased and luckily have been involved with was actually the formulation of equity and inclusion chapter in the India's STIP 2020, that is Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, that was led by Dr. Akhilesh Gupta. And actually at that time, I realized we discussed many different aspects. And what I want to emphasize is that we have discussed right now here quite a bit about dissemination of science, accessibility, increasing the accessibility to science and the conclusions and the data. But there is something else which Momita said and Pragya also wrote, and I think that's very important, and that's the knowledge creation. And in that knowledge creation, I have looked at the program of OSSAN conference, and yes, there are indeed discussions on data, the knowledge systems, the alternative knowledge systems, so on and so forth. But I think there is another important cultural dimension and of the diversity, and that is gender. And I think having a common platform of all the 3 academies to see how one can increase the participation and achieve gender equity in science is also, according to me, an equally important part of the, can be an important part of this OSSAN framework. Also, as a particle physicist, I have been actually lucky to be involved in doing research in a subject where collaborations and traditional foes working together has been actually a very common feature. For example, at CERN, Palestine and Israeli scientists, or Indian and Pakistani scientists, or for that matter, Russian and American scientists all work very well together. And in this scientific diplomacy, there are places like the International Center for Abdul Salam International Center for Theoretical Physics, where, for example, I have actually interacted with quite a few Bangladeshi scientists as well as scientists from Nepal and Sri Lanka. In fact, actually, I have had an ex-student who came as an exchange student from Sri Lanka to me to do his PhD. And I feel that one of the things that we could think in terms of the OSSAN framework is that we don't need a ICTP to bring us together. Or maybe we could use the structures that ICTP has already existent to set up a small, use that their facilities also to set up the part of the network. And I will talk in more detail about these ideas in our closed session. And last but not the least, again, very recently I was involved in the UNESCO study of women in South Asia and women scientists, that is. And again, I wonder why we need UNESCO to bring the Bangladesh, and there were actually people from Bangladesh, Nepal, and India who were involved in this. And Sri Lanka, I don't remember, but maybe they were. But I somehow feel that why do we need these external, we need to keep contacts with them, but we need to set up and interact more among ourselves so that when these international big groups start discussing an issue, we have an understanding of some of the issues that are specific to the cultural context of India. So I think there is apart from the openness in scientific publication, data sharing, particularly in the context of health, climate, and food, there are many, many other aspects also of open science on which all the 4 countries that are represented here can actually collaborate very effectively. And I know that for sure here I'm putting on my hat as a Vice President of the Indian Academy of Sciences. So I would say that Indian Academy of Sciences and also NASI and INSA, of whom also I'm the fellow, I know that we have been involved quite often in organizing such meetings of international experts. But I would like to suggest that as a part of our part of this OSSAN framework, where we could once again begin by restricting it to a more homogeneous group of people who share the cultural, in spite of the diversities of each of these countries, religion and what have you, we do share a cultural constancy. And in that framework, some of the aspects of research in science, as well as in health and so on and so forth, will benefit by looking at a more culturally homogeneous group. So I hope we will be able to achieve something and very significant. And I wish this forum all the very best, and wish all of us actually all the very best, because we are doing this for science, and that's where all of us are interested in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gardbole, for such a wonderful, for putting out all the ideas. And we were actually discussing many of these ideas. And for this particular conference, obviously, when we talk about inclusivity, we actually mean gender as well. So it's really an inclusive culture that we want to promote. And definitely, we would like to take the ocean vision forward. We definitely would have more discussion to see how we can actually cross this boundary, especially as we all realize that the visa issue is such a challenge for our countries when we want to collaborate, because not everything can be done digitally. Many things, as an experimental scientist, we know that many things need to be done in labs. So how we can even have more collaboration while sharing the research infrastructure. So these are all the points that definitely we want to deliberate in the conference and see how other countries, other regions have done it and learn. So thank you all our dignitaries on this Welcome Note Forum. You all inspired us a lot to take this vision forward. So I thank everyone. And since our time I start thanking with Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, then Professor Ali, Professor Shreshtha, Dr. Shreshtha, and then Professor Priyan Dias, Professor Bellare, Professor Wagmare, and Professor Rohini Godbole. Thank you all. So now we will move to our next session, which is more scholarly content. And we already have a next, it's a plenary lecture, and we already have Dr. Rajesh Tandon to deliver this lectures. Dr. Rajesh Tandon is an internationally acclaimed leader and practitioner of participatory research and development. He is founding president of Participatory Research Asia, PRIA. This is a global center for participatory research and training since 1982. He's also co-chair of the UNESCO Chair on Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education since 2012. Today, Dr. Tandon will talk about open science, pathway to knowledge democracy in South Asia. Over to you, Dr. Tandon.
Good morning to you all. Thank you, Momita. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, you can hear.
I'm delighted to listen to the opening comments from a range of commentators, Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Professor Wagmare, Professor Rohini, and our colleagues from Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And it is a great pleasure for me to be speaking to you on the founding conference of OSSAN, if I may say so. And first of all, congratulations to you, Momita, and your team for taking forward this initiative It is urgent and it is timely, and there is a lot that we can do in our region to take this forward. I want to share with you some of the issues related to open science that I have been working on for the last 2 decades, and in particular, in respect of some of the emerging recommendations from UNESCO and other conversations. I will try to see if my PPT can be loaded through my efforts.
If not,
Otherwise,
then I can share.
yeah, otherwise I may call on you, Momita, to help me.
And I will request all the participants, if they have any question, they can put it in the Q&A section. At the end of the talk, we will take those up. Yeah, this is working.
Can you see this?
Yes, we can see. Only
Is it
this,
now full screen?
no, the full screen mode has not been loaded yet, but the slides are there. So maybe you can again press on the full screen once more.
Okay, let me see if I can put the, try again, I'll try and share again and see if I can, because I'm, maybe if you can upload from your end, I will.
Okay, sure. You can stop sharing, then I will share.
I'll stop sharing and maybe. Yes, Neha. Okay. Can you see that? Can everybody see that? Momita, can you see that?
Yes, I can see your slides. So you can see your slides. It's in full screen mode now.
Okay, so I can continue now, and I'll request you to move the slide if that is okay.
Yeah, sure. Perfect.
All right. Well, so thank you very much. The title of my talk, as Momita explained, is Open Science, Pathways to Knowledge Democracy in South Asia. And I will return to this concept of knowledge democracy because in my view, that is foundational to the conversation we are having on open science. Let me begin by reminding ourselves in South Asia what has been the history of knowledge production and knowledge sharing. Next slide, please, Momita. Yeah. So history of open universities with global scholars. I don't have to remind all of you, but Nalanda and Takshala universities were considered to be the first ever residential universities located in the subcontinent. And these universities welcome students and scholars from around the world. In fact, the idea of Vishwavidyalaya is embedded in the concept of such universities. They were actually centers of knowledge in close linkage with society. Some of the work that scholars have done on how teachers and students were recruited to these universities suggests that society had a very active role to play. Communities nominated students, they looked after their travel. Scholars were invited because they had a particular knowledge contribution to make. The relationship between these universities and the larger society and the linkage between the knowledge produced in the university and the knowledge produced in society was much more symbiotic and ongoing than has been the case in recent centuries. How we have shifted away, therefore, from that tradition is a question that we should ask. Next slide, please. In our context, One more time you have to press, Momita. One more. Yeah, more, yeah. In our context, we are talking about this region, and I want to remind ourselves about this region. The history of knowledge in this region goes much before the history of Western science in less than 500 years. Our knowledge systems built on experiences, on innovation in a vast range of areas, from food systems to water harvesting to healthcare to craft. But these knowledge systems, and I'm using the phrase knowledges, these knowledge systems were not monolithic. These knowledge systems emerged in each socio-ecological region. So the knowledge is produced in the Gangetic Delta near Sundarban in today's Bangladesh, and the knowledge produced in the Himalayas, today's India, Bhutan, Nepal, and the knowledge produced on the coastal belts of Peninsula in today's Tamil Nadu or Andhra or Kerala or Sri Lanka. These knowledges were relevant and contextually appropriate because they produced solutions to everyday struggle. They produced options, they produced innovations so that a civilization could grow. Our vast indigenous community throughout this subcontinent has been a repository of great source of knowledge. And it is important, therefore, to remember that these multiple forms of knowledges which help produce solutions, innovations for civilization to advance had embedded linguistic and cultural insights. These are not knowledges produced in monolinguistic European languages. These were knowledges which were practiced, produced, and utilized in diversity of linguistic and cultural contexts, to which several speakers before me have alluded to. But I do want to therefore emphasize that knowledges are not only produced in the lab or inside the academia, that even today, knowledge is being produced in everyday life. People are producing knowledge to cope with a variety of disasters and pressures they are facing around climate. Think of the last 2.5 years of the COVID period. Think of solutions that each community developed to cope with that. Think of ways in which people were able to harvest their own resources, their own capacity, their own knowledge, their own food systems. Indigenous communities went back to collecting food, not just growing food. They went back to sources of healthcare that their ancestors has produced. And in fact, many of my relatives around the country were also happily enjoying the potential for immunity that are traditional health practices, which my grandmother used to remind me of. That knowledge system is coexisting with the modern knowledge system based entirely on a Western canon of logic and instrumentality. It is therefore important that when we talk about open science, we keep ourselves open to multiple ways in which knowledge is produced, stored, and utilized, let alone communicated. Next slide, please, Momita. I was just giving you some examples, but even in terms of how traditions of knowledge have coexisted, we have in the South Asian region a large number of local health traditions which have been becoming visible again, largely in the face of the pressures that we face through climate and sustainable development challenges. But these systems coexisted with other systems before. However, over the years, the more Western allopathic form of knowledge in healthcare began to devalue and delegitimize those practices. We are reviving them, but it is important to acknowledge that those sources of traditional knowledge, in cases like food or healthcare, cannot be just taken over by the modern corporate industry in pharmaceutical or global food industry, and not even acknowledge the sources of that knowledge that has been produced over generations. So, important thing, therefore, is to understand that there are multiple traditions coexisting in production of knowledge, and we need to be sensitive to them, open to them. And when we talk about open science, we not just limit ourselves to sharing knowledge, but also the way it is produced and various modalities and approaches to knowledge production. Next slide, please. I want to bring to your attention, many of you have already been quite aware of and active, and I know the DST colleagues have been very active at Indian Institute of Science, that UNESCO recommendation on open science in 2021, in November 2021, was accepted by all the member countries, and it has a number of ways in which it is talking about openness. It is talking about openness not just to share data, not just to share scientific infrastructure, important as they are, but also openness to whom? Not just among scientists, but also among the practitioners, among society, among those who utilize knowledge. Now think of the COVID pandemic. The frontline workers, the ASHA workers, the community health workers, the local panchayat women leaders, the community animators, they were the frontline workers in helping communities respond to the pandemic, explain the phenomena, explain precaution, propose local solutions as far as possible. But scientific knowledge and scientific discourse on the pandemic remained limited to scientists, not to practitioners. So when we talk about openness of science, we need to consider openness of science and its findings to practitioners in a way that produces locally relevant solutions, because solutions are predominantly contextual and local, and people act on those solutions when their own knowledge gets acknowledged and new knowledge is offered to them. The UNESCO recommendations talk about multiple ways of approaching science. They make reference to participatory research. I am extremely delighted that after 4 decades of our work globally on participatory research, UNESCO recommendation open science includes it, talks about citizen science, talks about people science, and therefore open to multiple cultural and linguistic tools and methods in which science can be practiced, and science is being practiced, not necessarily the science only in the labs and in academia, but knowledge production using different tools, different ways of systematizing experience, different ways of drawing lessons from experience in everyday life. Next slide, please. So I want to emphasize that open access needs to be considered open access beyond academics, open access beyond professionally trained scientists working in scientific research labs and institutions. A large number of scientists are also working in the field. Large number of researchers are working in the front line on a variety of development issues, from sustainability to livelihood, and they also need to be kept in mind when we talk about open access. The access to frontline service providers may require, therefore, attention to interpretation of science in a manner that is understandable and usable. But I would encourage all of us to think that when we explain scientific findings, we start from where the frontline workers are, where community are, not where the scientists are, because it is they who will make sense of those findings if we are able to start from where they are. We have, Dr. Gupta has mentioned about it, one nation, one subscription program, but this platform profiteering issue that has emerged from this in the experience of Netherlands. The Dutch society created this, but ultimately the platforms that led to these large publishing houses harvesting that data, repackaging that data in different ways, and not only profiteering from it, but also gaining significant control over what happens to the use of that data outside the platform. So I would encourage everybody involved in this conversation to take a harder look at these solutions, which may appear to be making sense, but below them are issues of control and governance, which openness would require greater critical analysis of. Next slide, please. The issue of openness to society is not merely sharing the findings of science to society, the science that is practiced in labs and academia. The openness to society may also involve, therefore, a two-way process, a mutual process of engagement where society may also raise questions about the manner in which science is being pursued. Society may also pose issues of accountability, because scientific innovation is not neutral, and its impact on the future development of society can be detrimental to certain sections of society. So how can openness to society include designing models of co-production of knowledge with heterogeneous societal actors? Societal actors which are, let's say, engaged in organic agriculture, societal actors engaged in indigenous system of medicine, societal actors engaged in water conservation. A large number of such actors have their own knowledge, have their own experience, but more formal scientific research is being carried out without engaging them, without learning from them, and without even thinking of generating collaborative approaches to knowledge production. When we talk about including citizen and participatory science as an integral part of open science, it entails respecting the ethical and normative positions that citizen science and participatory science take. Their ethical position is that science is for the benefit of society at large, that knowledge is not to be monopolized that knowledge is not meant to be used for profit, that similar aspects of knowledge and control over governance of knowledge need to be considered more critically if we are going to include participatory science as an integral part of policies of open science. The normative stance of benefit to society at large, the normative stance of knowledge for common public good, the normative stance of multiple diverse epistemic knowledge systems, knowledge holders, is an integral part of bringing them inside the open science framework. We cannot say that we want to include participatory science as a tool, but not its embedded normative and ethical considerations, because they will then produce options in how our policies of open science and their practices can become more relevant to the societies and the stage of development that they are in the region, in the South Asian context. Next slide, please. Professor Rohini mentioned about exclusion of women's point of view and women in a large number of scientific enterprises. I think this is not new. This has been going on. There are certain sections of society whose knowledge systems have been excluded. It's not just in 16th, 17th century Europe, but even today in India, in some parts of India, women's knowledge systems are being denied and devalued, and many of those women who produce counter narrative, who develop a counter knowledge explanation, are labeled as those who lost their mind. They are labeled as becoming mad and are rejected from society. So I think the point that Professor Rohini is making has a much deeper connotation in terms of exclusion of knowledges. Indigenous knowledge systems, we have a 20th century Sanskrit scholar who talked about a new form of epistemology even before the Western canon of science emerged. And if you look at what our practitioners have been doing in the field of agriculture, water harvesting, irrigation systems, many of them have been practicing these models and methods, but were systematically ignored or devalued, and their knowledge was considered as outdated or even not really scientific. I just want to remind all of us that before 1960, almost all agriculture in our subcontinent was organic. There was no green revolution then. Green revolution brought with it chemicals and pesticides, and green revolution brought with it new seeds and mono agriculture, monoforestry. The monoculture in agriculture and chemicalization of agriculture and the water tables, all this happened only in the last 62 years. Now, in recent years, we are returning to organic agriculture. We are returning to, the Prime Minister already made a call for traditional systems of water harvesting to be rejuvenated. Well, that is essential because those systems are very scientific. They are ecologically scientific. The system of water harvesting in desert region of Rajasthan was very different from that in the delta in Sundarban or in the Himalayas. So what has happened to that knowledge system? Those people who had that knowledge of organic agriculture, of water harvesting, local irrigation systems, treatment of cattle through those kinds of traditional medicine system, all that is being lost. We need to recover it, but not just recover it, also make it more contextually and contemporarily relevant. That knowledge needs to be, in a way, harmonized with the new knowledge being produced in our labs and scientific enterprises in such a way that it becomes relevant to 2022. The old knowledge system had its roots in that ecological and context, and that knowledge needs to be recovered but brought forward in today's context by our young scientists, our young researchers, engaging with that knowledge system, not ignoring it, not remaining ignorant about it, or not just putting it down as voodoo science or as something unscientific. The point about knowledge commons has become increasingly relevant. I don't have to remind all of you about the continuing debate we are having in terms of vaccines for COVID-19. India and South Africa made an appeal in WTO that the patent for the production of this vaccine should be open in light of the requirement globally. Knowledge cannot be used to make profits at the cost of lives of people. And these lives are largely being lost in the global south. It is the ecological system of global south which has historically given fillip to and foundation to modern science. If you look at, I gave you the examples of the pharmaceutical industry, you can collect examples from food and agriculture industry, and you can collect examples from textile, from craft, any field of work, you can collect examples where large multinational corporations have taken advantage of that knowledge, patented it, and used it for enormous profit. In a funny way, even the new knowledge technologies, information technology, we are using Zoom, and the amount of profit that is being made on the basis of knowledge, which should have been made available for the common well-being of society at large. We cannot become knowledge economies which produce such enormous knowledge and income inequalities as the world is experiencing. We have to move towards knowledge societies where the governance of knowledge is a collective enterprise, keeping the principles of largest benefit to largest population in mind. Next slide, please. We are talking about knowledge management, publishing, and I have given you some of the references towards the end of this book. My UNESCO chair, Dr. Badal, and I have last year published a book which gives us examples of how other places, other societies are exploring knowledge sharing in a more open, egalitarian, equitable manner. Many of the speakers before me have already talked about doing justice to authors, to readers, to reviewers, and the fact that 5 or 6 North American and UK based publishing companies are making billions of dollars of profit on the back of publicly financed research and the labor of our researchers and academics and the work that the reviewers and editors do is unacceptable today. We need to therefore figure out ways by which knowledge sharing in South Asia and largely in Global South is more equitable, more accessible. Digital solutions can be explored. In our book, we have given examples from Brazil and South Africa, where they have come up with Southern publishing models. There is a new model which has come up in Francophone Africa, where people were tired, researchers were tired in those societies for not getting access to those situations. So I want to make sure that we explore these options by learning from other countries as well. I am so happy that I noticed so many speakers from Claxo, and I know Claxo's long history of collaboration, and it will be a wonderful to hear from you all in Claxo how in your region you are trying to create models of horizontal sharing, open access to all researchers, irrespective of their affiliation, irrespective of their capacity to pay, and that learning from each other is not limited to only those platforms which are controlled by profit-making international publishing industry. As UNESCO chairs, we have stopped using such platforms. We are pushing for open access. There are a large number of open access journals which have come about, and this is a discourse that is currently very critical. I also want to bring to your attention, some of you may not have thought about it, that the academic ranking business, the Times Higher Education ranking business, is also very closely linked to international publication industry. The THE ranking industry enterprise is owned by profit-making publishing households. They are capturing ranking, and they are linking, therefore, ranking to publications in their journals which they control. And by ranking academics and academic institutions, they are pushing the global student community and research funding bodies to themselves, basically, to improve their profits. I think rankings are not essential for academic performance to be assessed. I think international publishing industry is making use of these rankings in order to make more profits, in order to enhance their control over the system of publication, which is being challenged through the open access discourse and open access campaign that is gaining momentum. In my view, the initiative that we have taken, OSSAN, I congratulate you, but I urge all of us in this region to, as some of the speakers before me have said also, to reach out to others in the global south, learn from them, and extend our linkages with them in a manner that the rich knowledge systems in our societies can be harvested, the knowledge commons can be governed in larger public interest, and we are open to not just sharing of science and scientific data among scientists, but more actively with practitioners in the front line of development whose capacity to improve local situations can be strengthened through science if it is available to them in a manner that they can use. Multiple forms of knowledge, multiple ways of producing knowledge, multiple users of knowledge, and multiple users of knowledge. This diversity is essentially the foundation of what we have come to call knowledge democracy. And in our view, inclusion, equality, well-being, and most importantly, survival of this planet depends on respecting multiple forms, cultures, traditions of producing knowledge, sharing knowledge, and using knowledge. And that is the pathway of knowledge democracy. And I appeal to you all to consider this approach to open science, supported by UNESCO, supported by many countries, national governments, but it needs to be brought in the hands of young scientists like you all who are involved in this initiative. The young generation of scientists and researchers must engage with this discussion, must open their eyes and minds and hearts to the knowledge that is being produced in their own societies, locally, contextually, and learn from it, and then engage with them so that we can also teach them and bring the fruits of new knowledge to their well-being as well. I think this is the last slide, but if there is anything else, Momita, you can push the, yeah. This pillar is very important because Professor Rohini brought this. In European Union for last 20 years, they're talking about responsible research and innovation. And in this framework of responsible research and innovation, there are public engagement, gender equality, science education, ethics and governance, but they put open science as a small part of it. I must say that ever since UNESCO's recommendation of open science has been accepted by the member countries of the world, open science has become a larger framework within which we bring gender equality, ethics, public engagement, and governance for common public good. Open science framework means multiple ways of doing science, multiple ways of generating knowledge, multiple ways of sharing, and multiple ways of engaging with society so that local knowledge and new knowledge, modern knowledge can engage, interact, and produce solutions that the society is facing challenges of. One more slide, please. So, very simply put, as I was explaining, we believe that there are multiple ways in which knowledge is being produced, not just historically, even today. Some of it is very organic, some of it is spiritual and land-based. Many of these knowledges are being used, but they are not being strengthened because the modern science movement has delegitimized them and ignored them. I think time has come for us to treat them with respect and engage with them in a manner that the fruits of multiple ways of producing and sharing knowledge can improve the quality of science and knowledge production and sharing on the one hand, but most importantly, improve the lives of billions of citizens around the world, particularly in the face of impending climate distress and sustainability challenges that the entire humanity faces right now. So I think the last slide would be a list of publications, perhaps, Momita. And I'm trying to bring to you your attention, all of you, that there is now a global emerging consensus in UNESCO and UNESCO-related institutions, including the World Science Council, people like Matthew Denise and others with whom we have engaged in the International Science Council, that, 3 months ago, in May in Barcelona, the World Higher Education Conference took place. The third World Higher Education Conference of UNESCO took place, and its top recommendation, which came by an expert group that UNESCO had put up, has these three very simple top line recommendations. Stronger and continuous engagement with societal actors. It is important to remember that higher education institutions are producers of scientists and researchers. That's where they get trained. Now, if higher education institutions begin to follow number one, stronger and continuous engagement with societal actors, perhaps the next generation of young researchers would also understand the value of it. Second recommendation, integrating diverse ways of knowing, fostering epistemic dialogue, engaging with other ways of knowing, other forms of knowledge system in a mutually respectful and open manner. If higher education institutions can practice this, perhaps the next generation of researchers and scientists would learn this approach. And finally, inter and transdisciplinary ways of producing and teaching knowledge. Transdisciplinary ways of producing knowledge, when we talk about finding solutions to sustainable development goals, finding solutions to climate distress, finding solutions that are contextually relevant and actionable. It entails bringing various disciplines and bodies of knowledge together, even inside the scientific discipline, inside the academia. Recently, I was interacting with a farmer in central India, and I asked him if his farming practices can benefit if university people supported him. He sort of smiled and he said, "Look, we farmers, our rural community, we have many challenges, but as I understand, academia has departments. Our departments are silos. Life is not silo. Life is integrated. So if we start producing knowledge in the context of actual challenges that our people face in achieving SDGs, in producing solutions to climate distress, then we may become transdisciplinary, because then we will look at the problem not just from a discipline, but from the point of view of that farmer or that community. These recommendations reinforce the point that UNESCO's Open Science recommendation has made. And I think there is now a global convergence at the level of policy making towards this. And if we can take advantage of this period, and OSSAN can leap forward by motivating young researchers and scientists to understand this approach of knowledge democracy and to look at it as a contribution to better science, better connections with society, and better societal well-being for all. So these are some of the points that I wanted to share with you, and the slide has a number of references that of UNESCO, of some of our writings that you can take a look at, UNESCO Chair's website, and the Global University Network for Innovation, GUNI, has a number of publications. This is the book, Socially Responsible Higher Education, that I was referring to. It is open access, open source, downloadable. You can click a button and have it in your own laptop. So let me stop here, and thank you for your patience. Happy to share any responses that you may have, but I am not the only one who can answer these questions. Several of you can also answer. Thank you, Momita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tandon. This was really a wonderful way of putting forward that open science doesn't only mean that the knowledge that we are producing into the institutions has to be openly available, like the articulate data. Well, we emphasized on this that the creation process should be inclusive, because the science that we want to do, a lot of it is for the society. So thank you for highlighting this aspect of democratization of science. I would now, and thank you for joining from Canada. I know it's very late for you, but still you did not record because of the question answer session. You wanted to be on live. So thank you for that. So I will take up the questions that we have from our panelists. So Professor Rohini Godbole wanted to ask a question. I will request Professor Godbole to come and ask her question. Professor Godbole.
Okay. So thanks, Dr. Momita. Thanks, Dr. Tandon. And I didn't know you were speaking in the middle of the late night. I'm impressed.
It is 11:30 in,
yeah,
I'm in British Columbia.
I'm impressed with the energy. No, so thanks very much for a very instructive talk. And thanks also for one of your slides where you said, and which is what I always believe, and I said it already, that open science, or when we talk of issues such as diversity, they should become part of open science, and then it's diversity of all kinds. So I like that particular slide where you said that open science is not by itself. These are actually subsumed. So I really support that thought, and I think we are on the same page.
Thank
The
you.
one
Thank
point
you.
I wanted to make is that at least this is most probably only true for astrophysics, astronomy, and particle physics, where I'm involved in. But in Netherlands, actually, there is a group at University of Amsterdam, which has started a journal called SciPost, and which is exactly on the line, for the reasons of the freeing the knowledge from the tyranny of the publication houses. And of course, in the areas of particle physics and also of astrophysics, astronomy, we benefit already from the tradition of multinational, not just multi-persons and multi-institutional, but multinational collaborations. But I think that is a very good example to emulate. So it's not just in the context of health and climate and societal issues where open science benefits from open science, but it's also in the context of basic research, that this openness. I mean, now, for example, astronomy, astrophysics people, and also particle physicists are throwing their data open to anybody. I mean, this is at CERN as well as at NICEF. I know this group. So the data are thrown open. All the experiments, like the big experiments like Planck or Hubble telescope, the data become available to citizens. And that is sort of a very impressive step that these specific sub-sciences have taken. And we really need to keep that also in our dialogue, because that is where one can learn from. I mean, of course, the point is that these basic sciences don't affect any technical or any financial stories. Be it, for example, in pharma industry, there will be a completely different, or material science industry, there will be a complete other implication. But it's a point that I just wanted to bring forth.
No, it's
that
a very
basic
good
science
point.
people have actually set up such platforms, and one could benefit and think about how to set up similar platforms in the.
I agree with you. I was giving examples I'm familiar with, but I am so
course.
happy to hear
Of
that.
course.
And my first degree is in electronics engineering, and I've been engaging with a number of people who went through that system of education and populated what is now called Silicon Valley. They're all my batchmates in those days. But many of them talked about that the science that was open in those days, even in our IITs, gradually became controlled by those who were sponsoring research. Not only research, they were sponsoring MTech and PhD students. So they controlled their knowledge, and now they become multi-billionaires.
Yes. Now that is why I brought this.
No, it's a very important point. I made a note of it, and I'll speak to you later on when I return.
We will interact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have Dr. Saeed Shamai. I think we have to make him. Okay, so I think the talking is now permitted. So please ask your question.
Good morning, Professor. And I'm Shahami from National Science and Technology Commission from Sri Lanka, Professor. So it's a thank you very much for you. I fortunately got about this conference. I came to know last evening. So I tried to manage to join this conference, and wonderful talking and your constructive talking. So I have one thought, Professor, that so ultimately what we are doing the research, that's ultimate purpose, the bottom line is socio-economic development and uplift of the nation. So I personally believe that the open science could contribute really, especially that's application process mainly in the stage of data gathering and data synthesis. So what we encounter in here that even though all the research has been funded by the government, mostly the treasuries, and it's something that between the researchers, they feel some not a mistrust. So I couldn't. That's each other is very afraid to share the data. So that's I think what we thought here, that in actually to give the confidence. And the national level, we doesn't have a data sharing policy. between the parties. So, so I would like to ask from the professor that thing. So rather than we go this legality to bound this data sharing policy or whatever the thing, the reason, because I am talking in that viewpoint, we are the policy formulating science and technology, policy formulating body in Sri Lanka to the government. So what you think, in addition to the developing a data sharing policy, what could really make confident to the researchers to share the data?
Well, I'm sure many other people on this conversation can also answer this from their vast experience. But let me tell you one thing, that in knowledge democracy or in open science or in bringing knowledge for the well-being of society, we always talk about the spirit of cooperation. And unfortunately, even inside the scientific establishments, inside academia, the spirit of competition has become very ferocious. And it has to do with this, publish or perish and these kinds of things. And people become insecure, so they hide their data. It's a cultural issue. It cannot be solved by policies or procedures. I think in the training of our young scientists and researchers, we should begin to emphasize that how cooperation brings diverse types of knowledge and information and data, and therefore it improves your work just as it improves its utilization. So the cooperative principle, the cooperation principle, the spirit of cooperation is something that has to be inculcated among the young scientists when they start learning about becoming scientists. It is, you need policies, but policies alone don't bring about cultural change. It requires understanding and appreciation in the socialization process of early scientists and researchers in all our research training institutions and academia. That's what I would say. But thank you very much for joining the conversation and bringing your experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. That means adaptive challenge, Professor. Am I correct? That's an attitudely we have to change. Attitudes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tandon, for answering this very pertinent and relevant question. So now I will move with the question that we have in the chat. So the first question that I'm going to take is from Dr. Dominic Babini. I mean, she is joining from Argentina, and I'm sure it's very late for her. So thank you for joining, Dr. Babini. So I will read out the question. So what she's asking, obviously she has thanked you, and her question is how to adopt the present research assessment practices to value diversity knowledge system contribution to research. Because as we all know, present research assessment system in STEM focuses on output like article, patents. Diverse knowledge system is not at all considered. So how do you think present system of assessment can adopt to take diversity into account as well?
Now, essentially, the way forward, there are a few examples that I can share with you. I was giving you the example of European Union's RRI work. They emphasize what is called the public engagement. Now, many a times that public engagement is not in knowledge sharing, not in knowledge producing, but there is an element in research assessment. And I found that system is helpful in pushing younger researchers to think about public, which otherwise they were not thinking earlier. The research funding in some countries, South Africa, Indonesia, and Canada, I know they have a system of research funding where there is a small proportion of money available for that research which engages communities in identifying research questions, in contributing to the research process and benefiting from research findings. Now, what this does is it creates an interest in the young researchers to say, okay, I will apply for this funding, and thereby they develop a sense of confidence and practice that this is doable and it produces impact, and then they can use that impact as part of their portfolio. Research assessment needs to be made more open to the idea of impact and inclusion. We talk about it, but our assessment frameworks are blind to these. So I think your question is well taken. I think this is an exercise that Claxo, OSSAN', all of us together can begin to do relevant to our context. But keeping the principle same. Principle is common, but its framework, its practice may vary depending on our context. But this is essential. In teaching, this has already begun to happen. Community engagement is now an integral part of assessing teachers' performance. And it is no longer, in India, the National Accreditation System, NAC, is now accrediting institutions by giving 30% of the marks, close to 30% of marks, to community engagement by the institution. And some of the teacher assessments are now beginning to include not just teaching, publishing, research, but also engagement. And engagement in research, engagement in teaching, and taking the students to learn with the community. Those things are beginning to get some weightage. I think some of us have to just take it forward and demonstrate that it is doable. That's how change happens.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. I think that's you have given a direction also how we can go forward. I will quickly take the next question we have from V.S. Jayakumar. So it's asking that in the present system of research, it's the publishing and citation which counts. So how we can make the research or research ecosystem more focused to find innovative solution for challenges and technology gaps for development?
Well, I think we are discussing a similar point basically, and this is where I would hope that OSSAN' as a network in partnership with Claxo and other such South Africans and maybe Indonesians and others, we all create models which we demonstrate are different from the current practice, and we say that these are based on a shared set of principles that we have been discussing, but they are applied contextually differently. Part of it is policy. Yes, policy enables support, like the UNESCO's open science policy enables us to move forward. Indian government has developed a draft STIP to which Professor Hony also made reference. Dr. Akhilesh has mentioned this. Likewise, there may be in other countries. So once the policy is there, then somebody has to do the real paperwork. Okay, how does it translate into practice? And this is where the network that we are beginning to create can play a very important role. And I would hope that some of you would volunteer to develop those practices which are based on the policy and demonstrate that it is doable.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the answer. So I would take up the last question. So it's the question says that UNESCO Open Science Framework acknowledges the right of indigenous communities to govern and make decisions on the custodianship, ownership, and administration of data on their traditional knowledge. On the other hand, the government and institution put a lot of emphasis on public availability of data through digitization. For example, in the 5th STI policy draft also does so. So firstly, this begs the question of how and whether the traditional knowledge of Indian indigenous communities should be made available in the public domain. It also raises the predicament that a lot of our indigenous communities are not yet beneficiaries of digital tools. How do you believe that this problem can be mitigated?
Well, I mentioned in my comments, as you said rightly, that the problem is in the sort of rapid, quick patenting of the knowledge and then converting it into a profitable product or service. The indigenous knowledge systems are based on the principle of cooperation, sharing, knowledge commons, points I was making. And they have a system culturally appropriate for them of governing that knowledge. However, when it does not mean they don't want to share their knowledge, but the history is, as you have pointed out, that the knowledge is shared, the knowledge is taken away, knowledge is converted into products and services which give profit to somebody else, and even ownership is not recognized. There are examples where even scientists and researchers have gone and collected that knowledge and not even made them as co-authors of the research paper that they produced. So it's a widespread issue, and I think UNESCO recommendations acknowledges it. It encourages contextually appropriate ways of handling it. I think conversations with indigenous communities about this should be taken forward. I am aware that in places like New Zealand, in Canada, in Mexico, there are protocols that indigenous communities have developed and which have been agreed to by the research funding councils of their countries. And even when European Union funds go to those countries and involve research with indigenous communities and indigenous knowledge systems, they have to follow those protocols. But we don't have that kind of a protocol anywhere in South Asia. And it may be a very good idea to have a conversation with indigenous communities in order to develop that protocol. But I'm doing some work now with Santhal Pargana communities based in Dumka University. Dumka University, the Sidhu Kano Murmu University is located in Dumka in Santhal Pargana region of Jharkhand. And I'm beginning to do some work along with my colleagues with faculty members and students there on this issue of systematizing, storing, but being sensitive to the ownership and governance of indigenous knowledge with Santhali community. So once we are clear of the principle, we'll have to find practical solutions which are neither pulling them back into dark ages nor succumbing them to the money-making devices of controlling patenting and knowledge. So some sort of a balance would have to be, and I'm sure that that there will be other examples that you all can share. But it is an important issue that you have raised, and maybe this is another task that OSSAN can take forward, because all the countries of the region share this. We have a long history of indigenous knowledge in this region, and we may benefit from countries like South Africa or New Zealand or wherever they have developed some protocols. We can learn from them.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of opportunities to engage, actually. Thank you, Dr. Tanan. So I would just quickly ask Dr. Babini if she has followers questions. Dr. Babini, if you're there, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Momita, and thank you very much, Dr. Tom, for your enlightening presentation. For us in Claxo, it is a privilege to be present in this OSSAN 2022 and hear your presentations. And we thank you for all your points. I took 3 pages of notes and picked photographs of your screens. A very interesting experience I will share with colleagues at Claxo. We are having our presentations at OSSAN. Thank you for your reception. And my question you already answered. It was about the changes you see most prioritized that need to be prioritized in research assessment. Thank you very much. And we are happy to share our experience from Latin America with all of you.
Thank you very much. I may not be awake, but I look forward to reading the slides and the presentation and the recording that Momita will kindly share with me and my colleagues. And I do hope that your participation in OSSAN is a building block of collaboration between our regions. And I know there are many things you are doing in your region which we can learn from, and likewise share what we have to offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Tandem. It was a very rich experience this year to share research. We did collaborative research with DST about research assessment in the process of selecting projects to be funded by funding agencies. So it was a very good experience. And for me, this also is an experience to wake up at 3 in the morning to hear your presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tandon, and thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Babu.
Momita. Can I take leave now? Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. And I just would take a permission. So maybe I can share your slides with Dr. Babini.
Yeah, please, with all the participants, all the references, please write to me. Go there. Everything is open access on all our websites. And let's take this forward.
Okay, so now we thank all of the participants. So I think we are well on time. So I think we can take a break, and we will come back at 2 for our next session. So thank you all. So the next session will start at 2 o'clock with a panel discussion where we will discuss